You know, a few years ago, we rejected King George. We didn't want a king, but I think America really yearns for a king. We just love royalty. And so we're fascinated. All the TV shows are tuned into the birth of a young son, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. He's a little kid, 8 pounds, 5 ounces or whatever, and he's third in line for the throne of England.
Well, much of the world has been rejoicing along with the royal couple as they start their new lives as parents. Charlene Israel has the story.
We welcome with humble duty a future king.
The royal baby has arrived. A healthy baby boy weighing in at 8 pounds, 6 ounces.
It's a wonderful moment for a warm and loving couple who got a brand new baby boy.
Keeping with tradition, the baby announcement was posted on an easel outside Buckingham Palace. But in a sign of the new century the royal baby has been born into, the announcement was made to the world first through an email to the press and social media networks like Twitter. In a brief statement, Prince William said he and Kate couldn't be happier. Celebrations erupted immediately. Famous London landmarks announced the news and fountains turned blue, as did Niagara Falls.
I just got in time to burst my bubbles and raise a toast to the new prince.
British papers reflected the national mood, this one announcing the regal has landed, and the Sun temporarily changing the spelling of their title in honor of the new prince. Today, the new family reenacts the scene from 31 years ago when Prince William himself was presented to the world. Meanwhile, English bookies have been betting on the baby's name for months, but now they say there's something new to bet on.
People are betting on everything. I think our most interesting market at the moment is the baby's first word. You can get Dada or Mama, they're the favorites, but Your Majesty at 50 to 1 might be worth £1.
William and Kate will bring their newborn son home to Kensington Palace, and later this week he will meet his great-grandmother, the Queen. The baby is the third in line to the throne. Charlene Israel, CBN News.
Terry, we like royalty. What is it with us?
Well, I think we are fascinated by it because we don't have royalty in the United States, and I think just the history, the lineage, just, you know, how they live, it's quite a spectacle.
We don't really, we've got rich guys, we've got millionaires. Maybe we've got the Bushes. Maybe we'll have another Bush.
I think we're good to watch England.
Not copy them.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, here at home, you kind of wish maybe we did have a king. They're fighting about this, that, and the other. The House of Representatives is now taking a hard look at the government's massive electronic surveillance program, the one that some people call Big Brother. Lee Webb has that story from the CBN newsroom. Here's Lee.
Yeah, Pat, back here in the colonies, Tea Party conservatives and liberal Democrats have come together to try to make changes to the National Security Agency's surveillance program. Some Republicans have strongly defended the program, saying it's important to national security. But the unusual coalition of conservatives and liberals has expressed serious concerns about government surveillance, all part of the ongoing debate over privacy versus security. The House is also considering measures limiting President Obama's ability for military action in Syria, both issues part of the latest bill on defense spending. There is talk of U.S. Senator Ted Cruz running for president. CBN News spoke exclusively with Cruz's father. Rafael Cruz says he told his son when he was a young boy that God had destined him for greatness. Senator Cruz spoke last week at a private Iowa pastors' conference. Heading to that early political state of Iowa has fueled speculation that Cruz may be interested in running for the highest office in the land. His father was on hand at the event as well, and the pastors prayed for him and his son. Rafael Cruz has been a traveling pastor for decades. CBN's David Brody talked to the elder Cruz about his son.
When he was 4, I used to read Bible stories to him all the time, and I would declare and proclaim the word of God of him. And I would just say, you know, Ted, you have been gifted above any man that I know, and God has destined you for greatness. And I started making declarations about the word of God to him every day.
Fascinating. Next week, David will have more from that pastors' conference in Iowa, including interviews with Senator Ted Cruz, as well as Senator Rand Paul. and an in-depth look at the need for spiritual revival in America. A large majority of Americans support religious freedom when it conflicts with gay rights. Rasmussen Reports conducted that survey. For example, 85% believe a Christian wedding photographer has the right to refuse to work at a gay wedding if it violates his or her religious beliefs. Only 8% disagree. Thousands of people lined the streets of Rio de Janeiro Monday, welcoming Pope Francis to Brazil for World Youth Day. It's the Pope's first international trip since assuming the papacy earlier this year, and it started with some nervous excitement. On the way from the airport, the driver of the Pope's vehicle got lost. Apparently, he turned off of a highway that had been cleared of traffic and onto a busy street. Crowds of people rushed the car trying to get a glimpse or even a blessing. The incident gave his security detail a few anxious moments, but the Pope reportedly loved it. Police clashed with demonstrators who were protesting the cost of the Pope's visit, about $52 million of government money in Brazil. Secretary of State John Kerry says Israel and the Palestinians will start talking again soon. They will discuss a possible Palestinian state and the key question of whether or not Jerusalem should be divided. John Waggy has that story.
It's been 5 years since Israel and the Palestinians held official negotiations. Now a new Secretary of State wants to bring the two sides back together.
The representatives of two proud people today have decided that the difficult road ahead is worth traveling.
It's unclear how John Kerry pulled off the deal or what is in the details.
Maybe there has been certain American promises made to the Palestinians. It could be financial, it could be political, diplomatic, and possibly there was pressure levied at Israel.
The bigger challenge, problems before any talking begins. The Palestinians aren't exactly united. Hamas, the terrorist organization controlling the Gaza Strip, rejected the talks outright, and Palestinian Authority officials in Ramallah say it's not yet a done deal. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also has conditions. He hopes to prevent a one-state solution that would include making millions of Palestinians Israeli citizens and prevent the establishment of another Iran-sponsored terror state. He also plans to let Israelis vote on any final deal. Both sides are skeptical.
Abu Mazen seems so reluctant to resume the negotiation and so reluctant or maybe unwilling to make the necessary concessions on the Palestinian side.
The pressure from the Americans is mainly on the Palestinians to accept American mediation and to accept Israeli conditions.
The Palestinians demand Israel stop building in biblical Judea and Samaria and release more than 80 convicted Palestinian terrorists before the talks even start. It's also clear that dividing Jerusalem will be on their agenda, a deal breaker for Israel.
During the last 100 years of the Israeli-Arab conflict, which precedes Israel's establishment, there has been ample evidence that the conflict has been over the existence rather than the size of Israel.
Israeli diplomat Yoram Ettinger says the U.S. hasn't learned from past mistakes.
The other issue, which is mind-boggling, is for the U.S. to be preoccupied right now with the Palestinian issue while the Middle East is burning.
According to Kerry, the talks could begin in Washington this week, but how long they'll last and where they'll lead remains to be seen. John Waggy, CBN News.
Pat, John Kerry has been Secretary of State for only a brief time, but you get the impression this is a major focus for him.
Well, it is, but Lee, I think it's an exercise in futility. The Palestinians don't have anybody who can speak to them. Hamas is out there doing their thing in Gaza, and the Palestinian Authority is very weak, and it's lacks certain legitimacy. It's going to be extremely hard for the Israelis to find a negotiating partner. But at the same time, I would just say this from a prophetic standpoint. Every time the United States gets involved in some kind of a pressure on Israel to split their land, there's some natural disaster that happens here in America. There was a very cogent book written about that, just traced one after the other of disasters that come on America. And I tell you, Jerusalem was given to the Jews. It is their capital, and the whole idea of splitting that capital is just folly. And mark my word, that will be the final sticking point all the way down the line. The Palestinian people are going to want Jerusalem as their capital, and the Jews are going to say, no way, it's not going to happen, and it's going to be a fight over Jerusalem. And when you read the Bible, there's no such thing as the Battle of Armageddon. We read all these things in the Washington Post, etc., about the Battle of Armageddon, but there is no Battle of Armageddon. The battle is the Battle of Jerusalem. The forces gather at Armageddon, and then they march on to Jerusalem. That's where the war is. And the war will be over Jerusalem. And I remember speaking to Yasser Arafat some years ago, and he said, oh, well, we'll find a way, blah, blah, blah. Well, they're going to try to finagle away. But if the United States pressures Israel to try to give up half of Jerusalem, God himself is going to come against this nation. Watch it.
A federal judge has temporarily blocked a North Dakota law that bans abortion when a fetal heartbeat is detected. The recently passed measure would outlaw abortions as early as 6 weeks into pregnancy and before some women even know they're pregnant. U.S. District Judge Daniel Hovland granted the injunction Monday. It prevents the law from going into effect August 1st. The judge called the law clearly invalid and unconstitutional. Actor Kirk Cameron says his latest movie, Unstoppable, can't be stopped. The 42-year-old star from the 80s sitcom Growing Pains told his fans Facebook and YouTube had blocked his movie trailer, calling it abusive, unsafe, and spammy. More than 250,000 people reposted Cameron's comments, prompting Facebook and YouTube to put the trailer back up. The movie explores why God allows bad things to happen to good people. And you can find a link to the trailer and more details about the movie on our website, cbnnews.com.